Parshas Bahar. The Parsha begins with the following verse. This is Chafei Aleph, 25:1. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Bahar Sinai lemor. And Hashem spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying. And then it introduces the laws of Shemitah. The laws of Shemitah are about the commandment to not work the land, any land in Israel, on the seventh of the 7-year cycles, the sabbatical year. All the land is to lay fallow. And the produce that comes about as a result of natural occurrence and not as a result of tilling the field, so that becomes hefker. It is ownerless and anybody can take it. So it's a year in which there is literally a sabbatical, and all the farmers take off. They don't work. So we have a question here. The Torah introduces in Parshas Vayikra, in Chumash Vayikra, in Parshas Bahar, introduces the laws of Shemitah by saying that Hashem said this Bahar Sinai. Well, wait a second. Bahar Sinai, didn't we have Har Sinai in the previous Chumash, in Chumash Shemos, Parshas Yisro, perhaps Mishpatim, Kisisa? That's all talking about Mount Sinai. Now we're talking about the mitzvos that have to do with the Kohanim and the Leviim in Parshas Vayikra. In fact, it's frequently called Torah's Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim. And Shemitah is said here, and it's relating back to Mount Sinai. It seems to be out of order. These laws are already, they're communicated after the Mishkan is built, and there's an Ohel Moed, and these mitzvos are the mitzvos in Chumash Vayikra, are said to Moshe in the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting. Why is the Torah relating back to Mount Sinai? And another question is, why is the Torah designating Shemitah as having been said to Moshe on Mount Sinai? Wasn't everything said on Mount Sinai? So it seems that we have two compelling questions. Number one, why are we singling out Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, for anything in Parshas Vayikra, and why specifically Shemitah? And Rashi asks the second question. He says, paraphrasing Medrash as follows: Maayan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. What connection does Shemitah have to Mount Sinai? V'alo kol mitzvos nemur miSinai. All the mitzvos were said at Sinai. So Rashi says, parenthetically, this is a colloquial way for people who use Torah expressions in their ordinary daily life. If you want to say, what connection does what you just said have to do with what we were just talking about, you would say, Maayan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. What does that have to do with anything? It's a colloquial phrase. So anyway, Rashi says, Ella, Ma Shemitah Nemru Kloloseha Uprotoseha V'dikdukeha miSinai. Just like Shemitah, all of its general rules and its specific rules were said at Mount Sinai. Av kulan nemru kloloseyan v'dikdukeha miSinai. So all of the mitzvos we learn from Shemitah, just like Shemitah was said at Mount Sinai, so were all of the mitzvos. Kach shnuya b'Torah's Kohanim. So, and Rashi goes on to say that we don't find that Shemitah was repeated or stated in Arvos Moab, in the plains of Moab, and therefore it was restricted to Mount Sinai. But the fundamental principle is, just like Shemitah was said at Har Sinai, so all of the mitzvos. So Ramban asks a question. Shemitah is not the only one that was not said at Arvos Moab, and it's not the only one that was said at Mount Sinai, so why is it singled out? As a matter of fact, at the end of Chumash Vayikra, the end of Parshas B'chukosai, next week's Parsha, for those of you in Eretz Yisrael, this week's Parsha, the final verse of B'chukosai, Chav Zayin Lamed Daled, is Ela HaMitzvos Asher Tzivah Hashem Es Moshe El B'nei Yisrael Bahar Sinai. These are all the mitzvos that Hashem commanded the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. So it's not only talking about Shemitah and Har Sinai, but it does introduce the concept of a mitzvah that's connected to Har Sinai. What's this all about? So there's let's call it a moralistic lesson that Reb Shamshon Hirsch states, which is that Shemitah requires a measure of hachna, a measure of humility that comes from an acknowledgement when a farmer whose life is totally devoted to working the land, he stops working the land. It's like a big time Shabbos. It's called Shnas Shabboson. And it's a hachna, it's a humility, it's an acknowledgement that there is an adon, there is a master that is greater than us, and we must subjugate ourselves to that will. And that, says Reb Shamshon Hirsch, is also the quality of Sinai, because we know that there were many mountains that were much taller than Sinai. The Medrash says that although Har Sinai was small, that's specifically the mountain on which the Almighty chose to appear, because one requires humility when learning Torah. If one comes in with a sense that he knows everything or that he trusts only himself and nobody else, it's not likely that he's going to accomplish what he could in understanding the Torah. I saw quoted in the name of the Chasam Sofer, I didn't see it in the Chasam Sofer, I looked for it, and in the Sefer Shaarei Aharon, and a similar concept is found in Maayan Beis Hashoeva by Schwab, which is that Shemitah is unique, perhaps among all of the mitzvos of the Torah. It presents a unique challenge, which is that the Torah says specifically, and if you will say, what will we eat in the seventh year if we're not toiling on the field, and we're not only we're not planting, but we're not reaping, we're not harvesting, what are we going to eat? So the Torah says, I'm going to send, Tzivisi es birchasi, I'm going to make enough produce, cause enough produce in the sixth year and the eighth year that you will not suffer as a result of keeping Shemitah. Now, this is something that a human being can't control. It is impossible for a human being to say, I will guarantee you. A person could say it, but it's impossible to deliver or to be confident that you can deliver on a promise to increase all of your bounty in the years surrounding the Shemitah year. In addition, from an agricultural perspective, an economic perspective, Rav Schwab points out that Shemitah, on a natural level, does not make sense. Because even though you might say that laying fallow is a good thing for a field, but it's not a good thing for the economy for all fields to lie fallow at the same time. That we would assume it would be a devastating blow to an economy, that all of a sudden the economy shuts down for a year. His point is that no human being would be foolish enough to codify this if he were creating a system of laws. No human being would be foolish enough to create a law and a series of laws, klaloseha vidiktukeha, all of its general laws and all its specific laws that are guaranteed to, in the natural order, either crash an economy or rely on some miraculous deliverance in the years that precede and succeed the Shemitah year. It's not within human control, and as such, it's an argument, a compelling argument, that the Torah was not written by humans, as is popularly believed outside of the faithful community. That even if one would argue, oh well, Code of Hammurabi, other codes prohibit murder and prohibit stealing, and you could say John Locke and the social contract, etc., but none of them would be brazen enough to include a mitzvah that shuts down the economy and promises to deliver bounty to compensate. And if that happens, it's clearly supernatural. It's clearly from God. And, says Rav Schwab and the Chasam Sofer, that this is an indication, this sheds light on all the other mitzvahs of the Torah, that they are similarly of divine origin, and that the entire Torah is of divine origin. So we take this one mitzvah of Shemitah, which is unique in its supernatural characteristics. And we say if this was given on Mount Sinai, so as a matter of a fortiori, kal v'chomer, so then all the others were given on Mount Sinai as well. Have a good Shabbos.